Hi, everybody. Sorry we're late. I'm here in Chicago with Era, and I'm going to tell them why we're late.
Well, we are waiting on our vegan, gluten-free Korean kimchi bowls from Grubhub, and it's Saturday night in Chicago, and getting food delivery is difficult. It's been 2 hours, so we might have to interrupt our live feed to get our food, but we promise we won't eat it in front of you, even though we are going to want to eat it in front of you.
Yes, we will, but
We'll wait.
But we won't.
We'll wait.
We'll wait. But we may have to, because we're on the third floor, and so Era may have to sprint down to pick it up.
It'll be fine.
I'll keep us rolling here. So hi, everybody. Happy Ghost Stories with Spooky Ms. T.I. and my special guest, Miss Era. So we were talking. I love to do stories with Era. I really do. I like spending time with her. We've had many very interesting conversations all afternoon.
Yeah, we have.
We've talked about everything essential, and I think we figured it out, right?
For the most part.
For the most part, we figured it out. We figured out that we are figuring it out. That's what we did.
Yeah, this is the first time you've come and visited me in my new place here in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I've got a great, interesting place in Chicago, and it's nice to actually be doing this live feed here. So don't be surprised if you hear some birds chattering in the background, or if you see a cameo by a small fox that lives in my house.
Here she is. So we were talking about what we'd like to talk about tonight. I hope you're all doing well, and nothing too spooky has happened to you lately. But Eric,
I hope something spooky's happened to you.
Nothing too spooky. Spooky is good. Too spooky, we don't want anxiety, but we definitely want some spooky to be happening. So Era's going to tell us a story about connecting in different ways.
Yeah, so this is a story. I was actually excited to tell this story, and when this happened, because it didn't happen that long ago, it happened in January of this year. Shortly after it happened, I actually called my mom to tell her all about it, and one of the first things I said is, I can't wait to tell this story on Spooky Miss T.I. because it's actually it was quite a cool experience. And I told Ezra this story too, and he named it the Spirit Referral. And I actually kind of like that name because in this kind of situation that happened, I feel like the connection happened before like the really spooky thing kind of happened. Mm-hmm. And so in 2020, in like the late summer of 2020, after I'd been locked down for the majority of the year, I wasn't seeing any clients. I started seeing clients again maybe in August of 2020.
You should tell what you do because not everybody will know what you do.
So I go to people's homes and I do health coaching, fitness training, and massage therapy. And so I go to people's homes and I work with people in their homes. I do all kinds of work, and it's very personal to people. And I work with a wide range of people. And so in this particular instance, I was seeing a client at her residential building, and I had my massage table with me. It was in August of 2020. And I was leaving a visit with a client, and I was walking out of the building, and I was in like the residential lobby, and somebody stopped me. She goes, "Oh, is that a massage table?" And I said, "It is." And she goes, "Do you do massage in home?" And I said, "I do, depending on where you live." And she goes, "Well, are you taking any new clients?" I said, "It depends." I said, "Why don't you give me your information and we can talk about it and see if it'll work." So she gave me her phone number, and I reached out to her, and she lived close enough, so I had some time to see her. I scheduled my first appointment with her. I think I saw her maybe a couple of weeks after I met her in the lobby. And when I first went to her home, she had massage linens, and she told me that she was familiar with massage, that she was really looking for a therapist, that she hadn't had a therapist in a little while, since like 2019, I think she said. She proceeded to tell me that she had regular massage for about 30 years from the same person. So she had a therapist that she'd worked with for 30 years. And in the fall of 2019, she told me that her therapist, whom I will call Lauren, remind me to keep using that name. Lauren, because I don't want to breach anybody's confidentiality.
Right.
So we'll just call this massage therapist Lauren. And she said that she had been working with Lauren at least once a month, oftentimes more than once a month, for the past 30 years. And that in the late summer of 2019...
It's the dog.
Yama, you need to stop. Hey. You gotta get her out of there.
Yama,
she's being destructive.
Stop it.
Stop.
Sorry.
In the late summer of 2019, her massage therapist had been experiencing a lot of like stomach upset. There was something going on with her digestive system and she was having a lot of issues. But this woman apparently was in her late like 50s, maybe early 60s, and nobody really thought it was anything serious. In the fall, right around Thanksgiving of 2019, apparently, the client who I was now working with had an appointment with her other massage therapist, and the woman had called and said she had to cancel the appointment because she was in the hospital. She was sick. Nobody thought anything of it. She said she had no idea that it was serious. The woman didn't express that it was serious. And that she was going to go visit her in the hospital that weekend. And they had obviously developed a fairly close relationship over 30 years. And so that weekend she'd planned on visiting her in the hospital. But a couple of days later, she got a call from her massage therapist's daughter who said that she had died. Apparently there was some kind of an infection and it went septic very quickly and she died in the hospital. The woman who I was working with, now my client, was obviously very upset by the whole situation. This was a friend of hers. This was a confidant of hers. This was somebody that she had a close relationship with. It was sudden. There was no closure. And she also depended on this person. This person was an ally for her and somebody that she trusted and confided in. And so when I did my first appointment with her, she explained all of this to me. And I could really feel her love for this person and the connection for this person. And so I told her I'd do my best, and so I did. And I retained her as a client, and I started seeing her more regularly, at least once a month. And that, close to New Year's of that year, so that would have been 2020, 2021, she told me that she wanted to schedule a 2-hour appointment with me and that she had this ritual that she'd been doing for 30 years and she'd been doing it with her other therapist and she hadn't done it, with anybody else. And it was a end of the year ritual where she wanted a 2-hour bodywork session. She had a whole visualization thing that she would do, and it was all about releasing the previous year, transitioning into the new year. She's a pretty, in-tuned person. And she asked me if I was available. I said, sure, I'll find some time to come and do this with you. So I did that with her in 2020 to 2021. And then I've seen her throughout the year of 2021. And throughout 2021, she sold the condo that she'd been living in for 20 years. She moved into a new place. There was a whole bunch of change in her life. And so the new year came around, and this is back in January. I couldn't see her on the new year, but I saw her just after the new year in January, and that came around just, this past January 2022. She wanted to do this same ritual. So we set up a time, and I went to her new place, and we set up for the massage, and she put the playlist that she wanted on.
What is she doing?
I don't know, she's being a bastard.
Yama.
Sorry, my dog is trying to get all the attention.
Seriously.
Yama,
she can't figure out who you're talking to.
Yeah, she doesn't. She doesn't know why I'm not talking to her.
She came up and sat up here, and then she was looking in that direction to see who are we talking to. Anyway.
Come lay down, Yama. Come lay down. Don't be a brat. But anyways, so I went to her house, set up in her new place, set up for the massage and everything, and we started working. Now, one of the things with her from the moment that I started working with her is she had this hip issue, this chronic hip issue. And she talked about her previous massage therapist a lot, especially during sessions. And she would always say, oh, Lauren used to do this one thing to my hip, and she would work on it for like a really long time, but eventually it would release. And I wish I knew what she did. And I was like, I don't know, you know. And so during her session, during this New Year's ritual, I started working on her body, and I started, you know, where she always wanted me to start, which is on this one problematic hip. And I'm working on this hip, and in my mind, I start to kind of say, just kind of out loud in my mind, but I'm like, Lauren, what was it? Like I directly asked the therapist. I said, Lauren, what was it that you used to do to help release her hip? What was the technique that you used to use? And I continued to work, and you know, the music, and there's dim light, and I just sort of like zoned out. And I wasn't really paying attention to I wasn't really present or paying attention to what I was doing. And eventually I was just kind of in a rhythm. I wasn't really being intentional about what I was doing. And like 10-15 minutes passed, and I had been working in this area, and I started to move into a different part of her body. And when I started to kind of come back to awareness, but I really zoned out. And when I came back to awareness, I realized that the technique that I was using on her body really wasn't my technique. You know, my technique is very clinical, I work on the articulations of the bone. It's medical based, and the technique that I was using when I snapped in was really a Swedish technique. It was really superficial. It was rhythmic. It was different than what I normally do. And so I moved to a different part of her body, and you know, during this whole time I wasn't speaking to her, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, I just asked her, I said, hey, by the way, how's your mom? And she kind of, in a hesitant sort of voice, she said, well, she's good. It's her birthday tomorrow. And I said, oh, happy birthday to Mom. She goes, yeah, she's 93. And I said, wow, and she's doing okay? She's like, yeah, she's doing okay. And I continued to work with her. And then a couple minutes later, you know, I turned her over, and she's facing up. And I was still kind of a little zoned out. And she said to me, she goes, you know, while you were working, she goes, my hip feels great. She goes, well, you were working my hip, I felt like you were like channeling Lauren. And I just said, well, I was. And she kind of opened her eyes, and she looks at me, she goes, really? And I said, and I blurted out, and it didn't come from anything I was thinking. You know how most of the time you think something before you say something? I wasn't thinking before I said it. And I just said, by the way, nice place. I really love the color. And she's laying face up, and I'm over her with my hands on her head, and she looked up at me, and tears filled her eyes, and tears start falling down her face. And she goes, oh my God. She said, Lauren always used to ask me how my mom was. You know, she always knew when my mom's birthday was. She goes, this morning I was thinking, she goes, you know, I used to do this exact ritual with her for like 30 years. And this morning, she said, I was thinking about her, and I was thinking about how much she would have loved my new place. And she goes, and I picked the color out that I painted this upstairs part of, and this bedroom, this guest bedroom. She goes, because sometimes she would come over, she would stay over here. She goes, we would do our body work, we would hang out, sometimes we'd have wine, she would hang out, she would stay the night at my house. She goes, I picked the color that I painted this room that we're in right now because it was her favorite color. It was this, it's like this soft turquoise. She said she wore this color all the time. This was the color of jewelry she used to wear. She goes, I would go to Sedona all the time, and I would get a piece of jewelry for her when I would visit, Sedona that was this color. She goes, this was her favorite color. And she goes, you really were channeling her. And it was an interesting thing because she was there in that moment. And she was there because this was their connection. I was just there. And it wasn't as if she showed up like a ghost or an entity. She came through for that experience. It was about, she connected to that experience through me for this other person that she cared very deeply about. And it was such a profound experience for me because I felt the channeling happen, but it wasn't something that I did. And it wasn't as if she manifested, it wasn't like a ghostly thing. It was just this was their thing. And I helped her complete something. And I also feel like my connection with this client, like why I call it kind of like this spirit referral, was me running into this client. I feel oftentimes like I am congruent and in sync with the purpose that others are trying to fulfill, or that other entities, like I feel like I'm in sync with things. Like I find myself in a frequency often, and I feel like even my meeting that person was me being in that frequency. And it kind of came full circle in that experience. She was able to complete something that she had not been able to complete. Both of them.
Right.
Through that experience. And that client, and after we had that moment, she cried a lot, and she told me how special this person was. And she was able to express her love for this person, and she never really had gotten that moment. She said she'd felt that, but she got to actually feel that release.
And the connection
again.
Yeah, we talked about, mediumship and connecting to spirit, and there's so many different ways to do that. And one is like what you're describing, where you just become a conduit to help people regain their connection, to do what needs to be done, And I imagine your client, when her therapist and friend suddenly was in the hospital and suddenly passed away, there was no time, no way to really have any kind of closure whatsoever.
There wasn't.
And this might have been a good way, a final connect to be able to say goodbye.
They canceled their order.
Bummer. Well, at least we won't have to interrupt the call, but we may have to go to 7-Eleven for chips and salsa later.
Something.
Oh well, life in the fast lane here in Chicago. So I want to talk about a little bit of other ways that you felt just that things just serendipitously happen and you connect.
Well, that was, I think that one of the points about that particular situation is I feel like sometimes we try to kind of inoculate our intention into something that is not there. It's not about us. Mm-hmm. That situation was not about me. There was nothing that I could have intended to bring to that situation.
Right.
It was simply my openness to receive. It was the only intention that I had in that situation was to provide care for this person, and somebody else that cared for that person was able to kind of come through and do that. And so I think that sometimes when we are working on connecting with other places, sometimes we have to get out of the way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's really not about us. And I think that honestly, being in the current, being congruent with those energies, being able to pick up on those things, I think that many of us, and I catch myself doing this, and when I do catch myself doing this as of late, I used to do this a lot more when I was younger. As I've gotten older, I do this a lot less. When I find myself in synchronicity, I try to manipulate it to see if it's real. And that shuts it off.
Yeah, it's like missing the point.
It does. It shuts it off.
Right.
So like when you see something that feels like a synchronicity, that feels congruent, or that like you're on the circuit, like things are aligning, and you then try to make it line more so you can prove it to yourself that you're the one aligning things,
Right.
you'll mess them up.
Or even asking, is this real?
Is this real?
You know, give me a sign is probably the worst,
Worst thing you can
could
do.
ever do, because if you have connected, that's the sign.
Yeah.
I've talked with many people, especially people who are grieving, and one of the things with body work is it will, draw out grief, and
Yeah, well, yes. When you're working with other people's pain, vulnerability, and discomfort, be it physical, emotional, or spiritual, you do have to let go of yourself a lot. Because in order to actually work with somebody else's pain, physical, emotional, or spiritual, the best role that you can be in to do that is just present for them, not for yourself. Nothing that you're trying to impose. And the truth is that when you're doing that kind of work, people's bodies will talk to you, people's energies will talk to you, and it's not about layering your own perspective on top of it. And sometimes it's not even about translating it in an articulative way. It's just about being there for them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for anybody ever is be a witness.
just be present.
And just stay there. That reminds me of this really powerful story that's not a spooky story, but it's kind of along the lines, it's kind of on these terms. I was just telling another client who was expressing some deep emotional struggle that she was going through. She was expressing this to me, and I told her this story. I read this story somewhere online, and it was about this surfer who had experienced a really traumatic situation where he'd gotten caught in dangerous surf, and he lost control of the direction of where he was going, and he was getting thrown up against these rocks. And he was in the turbulent water, and he was fearing death, and he didn't know if he was going to get out. But eventually some people on the beach were able to get him out, but his body was really injured, and he had taken on water, and he didn't know if he was safe or if he was going to make it. Panic, right? And he said somebody on the beach, once they got him on the beach, put their hand on his chest and just simply said to him, "I'm here." And he said the moment that happened, the moment that he was able to connect with that other person, it didn't even matter what would have happened. Just knowing that there was somebody else that was present for him in that moment changed the entire dynamic. And it was this capacity to be there for someone else. This capacity that somebody else was there for him in that moment of fear. And when people are really vulnerable, even in this situation, I was simply there for my client. That's what allowed this other person, this other nurturer, to come through.
Right.
And I think that is a form of being a medium or a conduit. That sometimes you really do have to get out of the way. And some of the things that you'll be able to hear and channel or understand or recognize actually happen because you don't put yourself into the equation.
And I'll take that a step further, that that is the only way to really be a spirit medium or a medium.
Yeah.
Is and that's early on, that's very difficult to do, because these experiences, connecting with spirit on any level, it comes from within. It comes from without and within. So it's hard to determine what is your own thoughts and what are the thoughts of whoever it is that's connecting with you.
And projecting, you have to be very mindful of
Not
projecting.
right, not to project. And
Yeah.
so over the years, I have learned to how to just set myself aside. I'm there as an interpreter because it is a different language, and I've talked about this with a couple people that I can speak ghost. It is a different language. It's a different. It's not like this conversation we're having here. It's more visual. It's like you see what happens, and then I can express that. But to be able to remove yourself, that's the way to allow that to come through. And I think this is something I also tell people who are grieving and ask me for help to connect with their loved ones who've transitioned, is that you were talking about this too. Earlier we were having this great conversation that you don't ask for a sign, you don't want to see them, you want to, you know how you feel when you're with that loved one? You can feel them. You can feel their essence, their energy. It is not stuck in their body. It's not in their mind. It's not in their behavior, their memory, anything. There is an essence that the way that you feel when you are with that person, the way that I would feel in my mother's presence is unique, unlike how I feel in anybody else's presence. And so when I feel that way, I acknowledge her presence, that, yeah, she's here. I can feel her here because my perception, I can feel that same connection without asking her anything, without, trying to find more out or make it more real. What is more real than that connection that we feel with each other?
Right.
And so for anyone, you don't really need a medium, although there are things that a good medium can do to help you make this connection and recognize it. But it's something that we all have, and I see as part of my mission to help people connect to that in themselves, because it's part of our human experience. It's part of how we evolved. We did not just evolve physically, we evolved cognitively, and we evolved spiritually as well. And so part of that whole thing is just recognizing it and letting it happen as it's happening. If Era was, if she was not perceptive as Lauren became present and just let that, when she talked about zoning out, the zoning out that happened was stepping aside, excuse me, and letting Lauren move through her, move in. Mm-hmm. And it's not like being possessed.
No. Because I was fully still present.
Right.
It was just, it was a collaboration.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it was a collaboration.
And you can just let that happen as you feel it start to happen and not be afraid of that. And then, like asking about her mother and the color was something that verified that to her client.
Yeah.
But even without that verification, that experience still would have happened. I think that Lauren probably really wanted a chance to, for closure. I think that
they both did.
Yeah.
They both manifested it. And it was wild because even later that night, I got a text message from that client, and she expressed to me how incredible that experience was, that she mourned her friend so much, and that there was such a lack of closure with that, and that she, that she didn't even like finding another therapist was hard for her to do because she missed that person so much. That ritual that she did every year was hard for her to do because it wasn't just hers. It was hers and Lauren's.
It was theirs.
It was
yes.
theirs.
Yeah.
And she'd sent me this message that she felt like a profound release because there was this knowing that they didn't miss each other. They were missing each other, but they were not missing from each other.
There's a good line. Say that again. They were missing each other, but they were not missing from each other.
The ties that bound them, what was important that connected them, continued.
And that is
yes,
one of the great truths.
Yes, and like you were saying with, when we lose someone in the physical world, when someone transitions, and we are looking for evidence that they're still with us, the evidence that they're still with us is our feeling that they are with us.
That's right.
It's the moments that you can literally close your eyes and immerse yourself in a memory of what it felt like to be in the presence of that person. Mm-hmm. That is more powerful than any kind of physical manifestation.
Than any Ouija board you could
right. Than any answer to any question that you could get.
Right.
And I found, that was such an interesting experience because, it takes a lot of work and practice to get completely out of the way.
It does.
It takes a lot of work and practice to get completely out of the way, especially if you are beginning, an endeavor in dabbling in
spirit
the
work.
Alchemy of energy.
Right.
Because it's intoxicating to get your ego involved in those things.
Well, it's also, even beyond ego, it's just intoxicating.
It is intoxicating.
Because the spirit energy is so powerful.
Yeah.
But then it's like, it's so easy to throw your own history in, because it is symbolic.
It's getting the magician archetype stuck in your head that you're the one doing.
Right.
You're never the one doing.
No, never.
You're never the one doing. Like, that's something that's very important to remember if you are channeling or manifesting. Like, you are not the one doing. You are to listen.
That's right.
And you are to connect with the things that already are there. And the more congruent you can get with the wavelength, the more you will actually experience these things.
That's right. That's right. And it's something you can learn to do and practice doing. And it is stilling yourself. It's
presence.
Being present.
Yeah.
and letting other things fall away. And just focusing in that other place just a little bit, like when you're deep in thought and your eyes sort of wander up to the corner of the room kind of thing, and so you're not particularly focusing on anything in your environment, you're deep in your head in thought. That's also how you get into spirit. Mm-hmm. By just becoming aware of what's around you, and then becoming aware of what is around you beyond the physical things, because it's always around us. It's and our loved ones are always connected to us. They're not always there hovering, it's not like creepy, they're in the bedroom with
and
you.
They're not the same.
No.
Like, that's another thing, is that when people transcend, they're not, they don't exist the same as they were when they were here.
Right.
That essence, like that essence that made them unique, the animation, the humor of their clay, if you will, that is the thing that persists.
That's right.
And so even like with this whole situation, I believe that Lauren was in some capacity was with this person all along, from the moment that she stopped me in the lot, from the moment that we crossed paths, from before we crossed paths.
Right.
Because Lauren was still caring about this this person's need for therapy, for wellness, for connection, for human touch, for all of these things.
And she had not had a massage since she had died.
She had not had,
Right.
and she lives alone, and she had not had real nurturing physical touch. So this person was with her, this energy was with her, because I believe that Lauren's energy, like my energy, was the energy of somebody that works in the capacity of helping people on their healing journey, with the process of them healing.
Right.
And so we were aligned. She and I were aligned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we connected, and we connected on that wavelength. That's the wavelength we were both on. I was on the wavelength of being present to heal and help this person, and that was a wavelength that she had been on so many times for so long that we just like lined up and went.
That's pretty cool.
You know?
So I have a question for you. Has she been back?
Oh, she's there every time I'm doing work with this client.
That's pretty cool.
She's not leading the work like she did in that instance.
But she's present. So she's lending her energy.
She is.
To the healing.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's a continuum.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's
so spirit referral. You've had other guides that have helped you in your practice too.
Well, I've had experiences where people or energies have come through on behalf of people that I'm working with. I'm trying to think of any specific incidences.
You told me about a doctor.
Oh, no, I'm not going to talk about that.
Okay.
No, but when I do work with people, and especially when I'm really committed to the work of people, like I work with a lot of people and I'm always committed to people on some level, but sometimes somebody comes through, sometimes I'm working with somebody, or even somebody that I've worked with often, and I'm working something specific for them, or for some reason, some energies come through for people when I'm working with them. Mm-hmm. And I've always gotten information, messages, and direction. I don't always share it with my clients. Many people, depending on where they are in their life or whatever, are not totally receptive to these things.
Right.
But
you know their energy's there, lending itself to their healing.
Yeah.
I remember after when I was in the early stages of recovering from my accident, I went over to Ruth Ann's, and she and Nancy did Reiki for me, and I was on the Reiki table, and my eyes were closed, and they were just the music was on, and they were moving, and pretty soon I felt 3 people there. I had Nancy was on one side and Ruth Ann was on the other, and there was someone right at my head that I felt the hands in my head, and it was my friend Mary. And Mary was always, she was so loving and nurturing to me, and she was the Reiki master who taught both Nancy and Ruth Ann. And she had, when I was so sick, I'd had surgery, and then I had post-surgical emboli and pulmonary embolisms, multiple in my lungs, so much so that like the bottom 2/3 of each lung was not functioning, and I was in critical care, and it was very touch and go. It was very dangerous physically and emotionally for me. I had just had a hysterectomy, so there was all this going on, and Mary came alive. She had not passed yet, and she sat with me, and she put together a group that came and did Reiki in the hospital with me, and it was, I remembered her, she was up at my head, and she was like leading, and the energy was coming from everywhere, and then there were spirit entities that came in too as part of that. That's a whole long story, but I remember Shelley sent an SOS out via email. This was before social media, to many of our friends across the country, that musical mycelium, that there was going to be a Reiki session, and if everyone would focus and send me good energy. And I could feel the room lighten and warm and my eyes were closed. And at that moment, I think I may have even said, I'm going to be okay. Because I knew, and prior to that, I couldn't barely breathe, and I really thought I was going to die, but from that moment. So Mary was there for that. She was like my midwife into my, after a hysterectomy, instead of birthing, it was like that next place, where I felt like there was a hole in me, and she helped me with all that, all those weird emotions that come with that. And working with her, I realized it was not a hole, it was a portal to the universe that connected me to the whole universe. So Mary was very, very influential in my life. And when I was in, as I say, the early stages of recovering on that Reiki table, she was so there. I felt her. I could smell her. When she would do Reiki, her hands had a certain, you could smell her hands, the soap she used or lotion or whatever. But I could smell her. I could feel her energy. And through my closed eyes, through my mind's eye, I saw her. She had the most beautiful eyes and smile. And she was just looking over and smiling and part of this Reiki session. And afterwards, we were all just still there, and it's done, and you lay for a little while until you come back into the physical world fully. And when they were helping me up, I'm not sure if it was Nancy or Ruth Ann said, wow, that was amazing. Did you sense Mary here? And they knew she was there too. And she was. And all of us connected for that purpose. I think that happens more than people are aware of and more than people acknowledge. When you're when you find yourself in a dire situation, your ancestors, your friends, your loved ones who are no longer in the physical world are there with you. They may be there if it's coming to your time to transition. Everybody's heard these stories where your loved ones that have passed before you are always there to take you, to meet you there. Well, they're there when you are in stressful, in dire situations. And being able to recognize that when you feel them there, they are there. This is going to sound kind of strange, but I think, and that when George Floyd, I'm going to go there, when George Floyd was dying and the last thing he did was call for his mother, not like Mama save me, but she was there. And of course called in all of the rest of the mothers in the world, and the great mother. But I think that is a reality with us. So if you're feeling really sad or alone, or you really miss your mom, or you really miss your dad, or your partner, or your friend, your loved one, and you feel that hole, maybe that hole isn't a hole, but a portal to the universe, and allow them to be there without asking for a sign. The sign is you can sense that they're there because they are, whether or not you notice.
Yeah, and I think that like with Mary and any of these things, when the act of loving, healing, and nurturing is the act of being present for someone. And when you do that, that is an eternal act.
It is.
It is accessible forever. When you love someone, when you are present for someone, when you are practicing prayer, for something else. That is an act of eternity, and it can be accessed forever.
Forever.
That is the channel. So when you spend time putting your energy into caring for and being present for something greater than yourself, that is an act of that is an immortal act.
It is.
And it's accessible forever. And that is why you can access your loved ones, because they spent time loving you and being there for you.
That's right. And it doesn't mean they're stuck.
No.
And they're present, or they're watching you make mistakes. That's not. They're there to love you and to continue that love. And I've always said, that the one thing that I have experienced that transcends the veil, that transcends death, human death, because there are veils to many other places, but I think it might transcend those as well. That transcends death. There is one thing that survives death, and that is love.
Well, there's that quote. I can't remember her name. Oh, she's a minister. I can't remember her name. But the quote is that you walk bravely into the house of grief, for grief is just love coming up against its oldest adversary. And in all these mortal years, you can trust that love is up to the challenge.
There you go.
Yeah.
We should so if we find out who that is, I'll post it
Yeah.
on the page. But I think that's our message for tonight. That's our
Be present.
story. Yeah.
Be present. That if you are working on practicing energetic alchemy, if you are needing to connect with people who are no longer here in physical form, if you sense something going on, if you have somebody who is leaps and bounds away from you that you need to send love to, if you are concerned about the things going on the other side of the world,
You could send love there.
just be present. Just be present.
When you think about them, when you focus your thoughts and your heart to wherever there is trouble in the world, it helps ease that trouble.
It does.
It
It's
does.
it's an immortal act. It's an act of immortality.
And I think the more that we do that, every time we do that, it spreads it more. And if more and more people would do that, we would make a better world, right? So one person at a time, one immortal act at a time, creates this space where we can all transcend that which harms us and others. So,
I'm hungry.
me too. Our Grubhub order was canceled, so
That
we're
was-
going to have to figure out what
That
else
was a
to do.
savage move on their part.
That was to wait 2.5 hours.
They waited. Our order was supposed to be delivered at 8:30, and they canceled our order at 9:30, so that we have no other options but 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven. Slushies tonight.
Amen.
Well, everyone, you be well. I don't know when the next story will be. I will let you know when we're going to do this. Take care. Be good to each other, okay? And every immortal act. Bye. Right here. Right here. Right here. Where is the stop? Oh, we got to move this.